A Mother's Eyes, written by Madame de la Vie de Mirmont, translated from the French and narrated by Tori. In the vast living room with wooded panels, painted in white, the large Christmas tree stands, dazzling. Its sharp arrow hits the high ceiling. The small candles, which each apart would give a pale and trembling flame, together make a very intense light of incomparable cheerfulness. This light runs along the threads of gold and silver thrown among the branches. It bursts on the shiny objects hanging from all the branches. It livens up the vermilion of lady apples and the gold of oranges. Then, radiating around the tree, it animates the faces of the old portraits. Some, frivolous and adorned in their costumes of yesteryear, appear to be smiling at the party. Others, thoughtful, looking out from their disgusted frames like a window open to the present, seem to dream melancholy of things of yesteryear, of past Christmas. Finally, further down, the beautiful light illuminates the young living heads that crowd around the tree, blonde and brown, heads of laughing young people. Young girls dressed in fresh toilettes, whose eyes, illuminated by pleasure, seem to concentrate in them all these lights, all these joys. In the middle of them a slim figure of a woman, Mrs. Noguel, still young. Dressed in black velvet, stands out elegant and supple. She comes and goes from one to the other, eager, lively. She is the mistress of the house. The mother of two of the girls, so blonde, so pink, with candid blossoming faces, who are the center of a small group on the right. She is also blonde, but with a more subdued blonde, gently ashy. Her small features, barely touched by life, would seem childish to a superficial observer without two large, deep eyes, the color of flax flour. Two eyes that have already seen many things, that have cried and smiled, eyes that understand and speak. A particular smell reminiscent of the forest, the toy store, the fruit shop, the smell of Christmas, as the little ones say, floats in the air and puts in hearts this very particular joy, made of memories and hope, forgiveness and love, the joy of Christmas. On the foam that hides the foot of the tree, many white packets attached with favors are placed. Gift distribution has begun. To make the party more cheerful, Mrs. Noguel has imagined putting the objects she offers in several envelopes, each with a different address. They thus circulate, hand in hand, amid cries of surprise, laughter, exclamations, before stopping at those for whom they are intended. Paper litters the carpet. The choice was made with such intelligence and tact that everyone seems happy. Young faces glow. The mother, happy with the cheerfulness she sees around her, also radiates, and the splendor of her beauty made of goodness, shaped and as if recast in the image of her serene soul. She thinks that she is 1,000 times happier today than in the joyful time of her childhood, because her happiness is multiplied tenfold by the happiness she gives to her darlings, to all this beautiful youth in bloom. Her clear eyes seek the eyes to gather the joy of the pleasure she has put into them, which is the reward of a long and tiring work. Everywhere she sees the most frank and true gaiety. At the end, however, she flinches. A look shook under hers and slipped away. Hidden behind a group, a young girl, Lucy, frail and pale in her stern black dress, watched and strove to look cheerful. Thick brown hair, shared by a fine stripe, framed her pure forehead with their slightly stiff headbands. Her youth, which should have burst into her sharp black eyes, seemed to languish like a sunless plant, her complexion of a sickly white. Her regular features gave her the appearance of a sad little statue. Why was she there? And what was she doing there? Her place was not in the midst of all these lights and joys. Her dark dress stained, shocked like a false note in a melodious tune. Whatever she did to hold her back, her thought escaped from the bright living room. She ran along an alley of plane trees to a large gray stone slab where a very simple name was engraved. It was the first time she had attended a party since the cruel day when her carefree youth met the excruciating reality. For the first time, her morning clothes lit up on the neck and sleeves with a narrow white stripe. Her sisters had told her, "Come on, go ahead. It will do you good." She had resisted at first. No, she would not go. She would stay in her small, lonely room. There, in front of the portrait of the dear dead, she would relive the happy Christmas of yesteryear. She would think so much of her mother. She would seek her so eagerly in this infinity where she had disappeared that perhaps she would find her, and that their two souls, detached from the bonds of the flesh, would still meet in one of those ecstasies of tenderness from which she emerged broken, yet less sad. Why did she give in? Something she couldn't explain that attracted her in spite of herself, triumphing over her resistance. She had let herself be parried by her sisters and joined them. And now, in this merry meeting, among this youth, ignorant of pain, she felt stranded, lost, like a wild swallow in the midst of brilliant birds of the islands. Fortunately, no one thought of her. Her companions and comrades talked with such enthusiasm that they would not notice her absence. Trembling, she managed to gain, without being seen, a dark corner behind a screen, and, pushing her handkerchief over her eyes, she forced her wicked tears to come in. When would she be able to bear her sentence? Would she display it in the midst of these indifferent people? What an annoyance it would be if we surprised her. We'd be surprised. Wasn't it 2 years ago already? Shouldn't her grief be lightened? It was so long ago for the others. 2 years. Sympathy, which was loudly lavished on her in the early days, had been worn out for a long time. She could hear those who were called her friends asking her again, "Why are you crying?" Only 2 years, though. The years had seemed both long and short. Wasn't that yesterday? But what many dull days have passed since then. She too felt young, certainly. She loved life. Only, she no longer had complete confidence in herself. Did she not know, not by hearsay now, but by experience, that our purest, most legitimate joys are unstable and short, and that in the face of this mysterious and tempting life there is death? The natural support of her heart, the friend always benevolent, inexhaustibly indulgent and good, the one who was like the very bottom of her existence, like her reason for being, was gone, and she would not return. For the others, nothing had changed. Everything still had the intoxicating charm of a beautiful cloudless dawn. How would they have understood? They would go home and tell everything to their mother, who would rejoice in their joy, while she... How cold, silent, sad her room seems to her. Mrs. Noguel, however, who was watching the girl, had followed her with her eyes in her retirement. She didn't know her much, but her saddened youth had attracted her sympathy. In order to try to cheer her up, to bring her out of her studious solitude, she had invited her. Would she have been wrong? Wasn't that loving heart still too bruised to endure the noisy gaiety of a party? No doubt. The damage was done. How can it be mitigated now? Should she, respecting her pain, let her regain possession of herself? Or would she go to her to try to express her sympathy? A tender pity filled her heart. She too had lost her mother at a young age. She too had experienced the infinite distress of orphans. She was thinking about what her own daughter's future Christmases would be like if she left. As she still hesitated, Lucy returned to her companions. She had triumphed over her violent desire to cry, and returned to the middle of them with this calm air that made them say, "She is consoled." Mrs. Noguel stopped her on the way, but instead of the sweet word she thought, restrained by a strange modesty, she said to her, "Were you happy with your gift, my child?" Only her voice had delicate intonations, as if to speak to a patient. Her eyes translated her thoughts so well that the girl felt touched to the bottom of her being. Those motherly eyes, how they moved her. They were come, she understood, to find her there. It was the almighty magnet that had overwhelmed her resistances. And now it penetrated into her, warming her, invigorating her, putting in her heart a strength, a hope, a joy. It was blue, this look, of a blue extinguished like her whom she missed so much, deep and tender, a look she knew, understood, reasoned. "Thank you, madame," said Lucy, raising a face to her where a cheerful flame was dancing. "I got what I wanted most. Thanks to you, I have my Christmas too."